Well, it's the latest attempt at regulating the internet. Now, we saw the public outcry over SOPA, but now a SOPA-like bill is being debated in Congress. SOPA was supposed to stop online piracy, but critics say the only thing it was stopping was online freedoms, giving too much power to companies, allowing them to pull the plug on sites that they think violates copyright laws. And then there was SOPA's counterpart in the Senate, known as PIPA, or the Protect IP Act. It requires more court intervention to go, it allows for more court intervention to go after the accused website. But now there's a bill called CISPA, the Cyber Intelligence Sharing and Protection Act. Now what this bill does is allow companies to collect information about you and give it to the government. And the government simply needs to request it in the name of cybersecurity. But critics say that the bill is so broad it can lead to companies and the government monitoring and censoring what people say. So is the era of internet freedom coming to an end? In our last hour, I spoke to Senior National Security Fellow at the Center for Democracy and Technology, Kendall Berman. We discussed what this bill means for your online freedoms and if people should be alarmed. Take a listen.
Well, just to put it a little bit in context, there are a number of cybersecurity bills that are on the Hill right now. And we understand that probably the first of those to move are going to be in the House, likely in the third week of April, with the Senate moving closely after that. And we are very concerned about certain components of the information sharing schemes that are parts of each of these bills. And Representative Rogers' bill, the CISPA bill, is really the most alarming in terms of how vast it could potentially be in terms of the types of information that the government would be allowed to receive under the name of cybersecurity.
Talk a little bit more about exactly what is in the bill that people should be concerned about.
Sure. So essentially what the bill does is it creates a structure whereby private companies are encouraged to monitor for cyber threat information that goes across their networks and then share that information with the government. It doesn't specify to whom in the government that information should be shared, but the structure of the bill, all likelihood would be that it would be shared primarily with the National Security Agency or another component of the Department of Defense. So we have a number of concerns with something like this bill that creates sort of a vast hole in the privacy law to allow government to receive this kinds of information.
Now, we saw a lot of outrage over SOPA. How does this bill compare?
Well, I think one of the lessons that we learned in the reaction to SOPA and PIPA is that when Congress tries to legislate on things that are going to affect internet users' experience, the internet users are going to pay attention. And bills, you know, like Congressman Rogers' bill, the information sharing bills on Congress, definitely could affect in a very serious way the internet experience. And so, you know, we know people are starting to notice.
But do you think people are noticing as much? I remember there was that whole blackout with with SOPA and PIPA, where a lot of online sites shut down basically in protest to this. Do you think there is as much public awareness about this bill?
Not yet, but I think that as things move progressively on the Hill, that we may see something that's like that. I think that the other components of cybersecurity have gotten a lot of attention thus far, but the information sharing schemes are extremely important to pay attention to.
Now, up until now, the internet has been pretty much unregulated, arguably, but some people disagree with this. Republican presidential candidate Rick Santorum is one of them. Let's take a listen to what he said about this.
The internet is not a free zone where anybody can do anything they want to do and trample the rights of other people. But the idea that, you know, anything goes on the internet, where did that come from? We're in America to say that anything goes.
Now, that's interesting coming from a Republican who usually advocates less government, but in this case, when it comes to freedom of speech online, he's advocating more of it. But what do you make of his argument?
Well, look, I don't know what Rick Santorum thinks of the cybersecurity legislation, but I do think that, you know, in terms of his premise that the internet is unregulated, that's not true. Just because you commit a crime on the internet doesn't immunize you from liability just because it's on the internet. And law enforcement has many tools to go after crimes that are committed anywhere, including the internet.
Now, what is the likelihood that you think that this is going to pass?
Well, I'm not sure. I think that, you know, no one knows right now. There's a lot of different movements on the Hill, but we take each bill extremely seriously, and particularly Congressman Rogers' CISPA bill. We take it very seriously.
Now, supporters of this bill will point to things that do need to get regulated. For example, copyright infringement, or if there's a possible link to terrorist activity being posted online, or where the government would need to get a hold of this information. So what do you make of that argument where these regulations need to be put in place in order to protect citizens?
Well, I mean, I think when you look at the purpose of cybersecurity legislation, you know, we think that it could have huge benefits for people, and we're not against the purpose of an information sharing regime, so long as it's narrowly tailored. But when you talk about using information that the government receives that's purportedly for the purpose of protecting cybersecurity, and you're using it to, you know, for law enforcement purposes or for national security purposes that don't have anything to do with cybersecurity, well, law enforcement has tools already to go after those crimes, and we very much fear that the information sharing regime that's related to cybersecurity could very much become a backdoor wiretap or a surveillance program by another name.
So you're saying the danger then when it comes to this bill is that there's not really, when does it end? Will it go too far? There's not really any control because the language in the bill is so broad.
That's exactly right. We have a lot of concerns with the breadth of the bill. If it was very narrowly tailored to information, you know, that was very much related to cyber threat information, you know, there would be comfort level with that. But the way that it is written, it applies to so much of your online communication, and to have that risk go straight to the National Security Agency, we think creates a real civil liberties problem.
Now, we saw something like SOPA and PIPA. Now we have this bill. So we see this effort to regulate and control the internet. So, I mean, could this be the beginning of the end for internet freedoms for people, you know, as we know it?
Well, I don't know about that. I think, you know, as I said before, cybersecurity, when done right and when done narrowly, could benefit everyone, but it needs to be done in an incremental way with a narrow approach. And the heavy hand that, you know, current lawmakers are taking with these bills, you know, it brings up real genuine concerns.
And for people that are concerned about this and don't want to see the legislation go as far as it could, what can they do?
Well, I would certainly pay attention to, you know, the website, Center for Democracy and Technology, and the types of activism that groups like CDT and others are doing around these issues.
Excellent. Kendall, nice to have you in our studio.
So much.
That was Kendall Bourbon, Senior Security Fellow at the Center for Democracy and Technology.